Hello, this is Captain Jim for the Monopoly Project. We're here on the Monopoly Project yacht on Val Vista Lakes in Gilbert, Arizona. We're doing our floating book review for February 12th. Today is actually Super Bowl Sunday, and Super Bowl starting about now, and so all the bikini girls are off at the Super Bowl, so you just got me on the yacht here. And so we're going to review two books today. We're going to review both books were recommended by Jeff, our partner, our Monopoly Project partner and friend. And so the first one is called Hold. It's a real estate acquisition book, single family homes, very Monopoly Project-like. And so the second one is a self-help book called the 10 Times Rule, 10X Rule. And so we will be reviewing these two books. I will be right back with the first book. Thank you. Okay, this is Jim for the Monopoly Project. We're on Val Vista Lakes on the Monopoly Project yacht. We're reviewing our second book for today. As I said earlier, the Super Bowl is in Phoenix. It's in Glendale, which is the next town on the west side. And it's actually started probably now. And so the bikini girls are off over at the Super Bowl, so they're not here with us today, so you just have me. We did not go to the Super Bowl. We were actually 49ers fan because we grew up in Northern California, and my friend Peter is a 49er fan, so we followed that extensively, especially since Brock Purdy sort of came out of nowhere, their third string quarterback. Turns out he was born and raised in Gilbert, our town, and he actually goes to Rock Point Church, which my daughter goes to, so there was a real connection there. When he got knocked out and the 49ers got knocked out, we sort of lost interest. But in any case, so going on to our second book here, it's the 10 Times Rule by Grant Cordone. I think Cordone is the proper pronunciation. It's 240 pages, hardback. It was written in 2012. And a little more about that later. Again, this was recommended by Jeff, our Monopoly Project partner. And it's a motivational self-help book. There's a little about real estate, but it's mostly about, how to get pumped up and go forward. The Amazon description says that this 10 times rule unveils the principle of massive action, which allows you to blast through business cliches and risk aversion while taking concrete steps to reach your dreams. So anyway, let me divide this up into three sections. I'm going to talk about what I liked about it, what's good, a brief review of the book, chapter by chapter, or interesting thing by interesting thing, and then finally an overall view of what I thought of the book. The good, Cordone makes the point that there's no shortage of success. In other words, life is not a zero-sum game, and I think that's a really important lesson for everybody to learn and know. And it isn't just has to do with business or real estate. Or it has to do with all elements of human life, personal, financial, analytical. Life's not a zero-sum game. It's not you against me in a death struggle. It's all of us working together to make the whole world better, whether it's business, finance, marriage, spiritual, spreading the word of Jesus. You see my La Mesa shirt on here, our homeless mission over in Mesa. And so I'm glad that he really pounds that home, because a lot of people use that as an excuse. The second thing he really stresses is to take responsibility for your actions. Again, that's another one that's really important, is if you want to be successful at everything, you got to realize that you're in charge of yourself. You're an agent who has power to do things. You don't have absolute power. I'm looking back at the Super Bowl party we had passed earlier. You don't have absolute power. Of course, you can't control what happens to you, and depending on your circumstances, you may have a lot of power in your world or a little power in your world. But in any case, you do have power, and what determines what happens to you is not what somebody else does to you, but how do you react, and how do you react to that. So again, his comment about taking responsibility, I think, is really good. I really liked his story, which starts on chapter 23, about how he hustled to get a TV show and a couple other things. It's really fun. It's entertaining, and it does show the power of taking responsibility and driving towards success no matter what. You got to keep trying. I liked, again, the one thing that was new, and I always look for something new in a book that I haven't seen elsewhere, is he makes a real big point of customer satisfaction is not the right target or the first target. And I never thought about it, but he does a good job of explaining it and defending the thesis that customer acquisition is the most important thing. And from that, customer satisfaction will follow if you have a good product. Of course, if you have a bad product, you might have some issues. But he points out that there are a lot of companies whose products are mediocre that focus on customer acquisition, and they're very successful even though their customer satisfaction is not very high. And so again, he's got a practical reason for stating this, and it's true. I would suggest, if you read the book, that you start in the middle on chapter 22, page 159 through 186. He goes through, I think 28 or 29. I lost track. I was yellowing, highlighting them all, but I finally said they're all good. More practical advice. The first half is sort of motivational, self-help, rah-rah, work 10 times as hard as everybody else, so on and so forth, which, I know that's necessary to sell books and TV, and, not TV, but TV shows and, self-help books, self-help courses, whether they're video or podcast or books or whatever. But to me, it would have been a better book if I had started on chapter 22, went through his 29 or whatever points, because they're all good. They're sort of a bigger subset of what I just talked about. Like I said, the first half, I'm going to go into the review now. The first half is motivational. And like I said, the title of the book is Work 10 times, 10x, right? So 10 times harder than what you think it'll take. And he applies this to everything, like I said, not just business, but also marriage, raising kids, religion, church. And so he starts with that idea of you got to work 10 times as hard as what you think it'll take and of everybody else. And so then he goes into the 4 degrees of action that people use. The first one being nothing. You just sit there and complain about life and nothing ever happens. The second one is retreaters, those who make a stab at it and it doesn't work, and they just go back and hide in their hidey hole. The third one is the normal response that people use is they go out and try and do something. It doesn't work for whatever reason that may be their fault and may not be their fault, but then they have an excuse why it can't be done. And of course, the fourth one is his 10 times what he calls massive action. So that's the basis of the whole book, is to take massive action. And finally, on chapter 9, he goes into goal setting. I like that, but I like Scott Adams' Systems Not Goals strategy even better. If you're not familiar with Scott Adams, he's the author of the Dilbert cartoon. He's also become a political procrastinator, pretty successful, and also social commentary on all sorts of things facing us. And so he himself has some unorthodox views, and so if you want to go see his Systems Not Goals, you can see the link in the blog post itself. In chapter 10, he goes into the title is Competition is for Sissies, and he wants this massive action. And now I start getting into my critique that a lot of his stuff is unrealistic. And just hold that thought while I go through a few more examples, and then I'll put that in context. In chapter 14, for example, he says, he's talking about his business, as in your business, presumably, is that you should always expand, never contract. And he was writing this right after the Great Recession of 2008, 9, 10. And so, I mean, that sounds very motivational, but, sometimes that's not what happens. And again, in chapter 17, another example, he talks about the myth of time management. Apparently he's everywhere doing everything all the time, and most or virtually all of us can't do that. I'm not doubting Grant can and does. He sounds like that kind of guy, but it's just not transferable to the rest of our population. So, and again, on chapter 20, he does the same thing. He talks about omnipresence, where he wants his materials and his basically marketing to be everywhere. So that's why I basically come down. Now I'm going to go into my overall view of the book. Is a lot of the stuff that he says is unrealistic because we're not Grant Cordone. What he can do, we can't do. And so, and I know it's a way to sell books and a way to sell marketing materials and such. And so I'm not criticizing it from that point of view. I'm not saying he's wrong and he doesn't do this. I'm sure he does do this. When Jeff described him to me in the book, he was super enthusiastic because apparently they're gonna do some business together. Jeff, not through the Monopoly Project, but some other another one of his business endeavors. Jeff's another one of those guys who's everywhere, doing everything. He's he's a pastor. He's a businessman. He sells real estate. He's got 2 very successful children. He's got a great marriage. He is everywhere. So he's, those people exist. So let me get back to my overall overview. I have a good friend, Dave, and Dave's not he's not an intellectual. He's not a brilliant theorist. He's not, any of those things. I know it's hard to see me because we got the sun right behind me. So maybe I'll take a spin around before I head home. But anyway, I always go to Dave when I want something, when I want to ask about something that requires just common sense, not not any of these, all of these esoteric analysis capabilities. So I asked Dave once about diets, and David had been on a lot of diets, and he said, actually all diets work. They all work real well. And I said, well, then what's the problem? He said, well, the problem is you can't stay on them. And so basically that's my comment. Now the sun's right in my eyes and I can't see anything. Anyway, Dave's comment about diets, they all work, but you can't stay on them. And that's my comment about his 10 times, massive action is you can't run your life 10 times. Both in the, certainly in the long run, and I'll make a comment about that at the end of the review. Even he admits he's only been recently doing this. He tells a story about how he had his first epiphany at 25. He's now, well, when we wrote this book, he was in his 50s, having his first child, and apparently he would now be in his 60s. You can't keep doing that, And I guess the other high-level comment on this is, what is the meaning and purpose of life? You have to answer that question before you can devise a strategy for how you want to run your life. And to Grant, it is success, just spelled SUCCESS, in any endeavor, business, marriage, children, spiritual. I don't know that I agree with that, and I don't know that's the way to run your life or organize your life for everyone. I'm not saying, again, I don't doubt that Grant does this, and that's who he is. It's just, to me, it's not that transferable to the rest of us. There are good parts, there's nuggets, but only Grant can run his life like this. And that leads me to that last thought that I just mentioned, is that this book was written in 2012 when he said he had just turned in his 50s and he just had his first child. So now obviously we're 10 years into that. He's now 10 years older. He's in his 60s. He's got a child and maybe 1 or 2 more. I don't know. But now that he is older, is his view of the life the same? I know he's still pushing his materials, probably even more successfully, because Jeff heard about them and told him about me, and I read his book, and he's still out there doing this kind of stuff. So he's described as having a somewhat caustic personality. I haven't listened to any of his podcasts or looked at any of his materials, so I can't refer to that personally. But he sounds like one of these guys who's driven. So in any case, like I said, this is the book. It's the 10 times rule by Grant Cordone. It's definitely worth it for the stories and a few things that I mentioned in there. Anyway, this is Jim for the Monopoly Project. I'm headed back. You're probably already switched over to the Super Bowl. You can see the sunset behind me. We will catch you on the next set of floating book reviews for the Monopoly Project. Captain Jim signing off.